The story of ancient medicine is one we think we know. It begins with Hippocrates, the father of medicine, establishing a rational basis for healing on the Greek island of Kos. It culminates with Galen of Pergamum, the brilliant physician to Roman emperors, whose voluminous writings became the unquestioned medical authority in Europe for over 1,500 years. This narrative, while tidy and compelling, is profoundly incomplete. It presents a linear progression from superstition to science, centering the entire history of ancient healing on the works of a few great men. Vivian Nutton's Ancient Medicine challenges this standard narrative at its core. It argues for a fundamental change of perspective. To truly understand medicine in antiquity is to look beyond the towering figures of the Hippocratic tradition and explore the vast, messy, and wonderfully diverse world of healing as it was actually practiced. It means acknowledging the alternatives to Hippocratic medicine, understanding the deep entanglement of medicine with religion and magic, and examining the everyday life of the doctors who had to treat real patients in communities across the vast expanse of the ancient world. By drawing on a wider range of sources, including texts previously locked away in medieval Arabic translations, Nutton's work invites us to see ancient medicine not as a monolithic entity, but as a dynamic and varied marketplace of ideas and practices. This is the story of that marketplace, a world where physicians, priests, and magicians competed and collaborated, and where the path to health could lead equally to a doctor's clinic, a religious sanctuary, or the workshop of a charm maker. Before we can understand ancient medical theories, we must first appreciate the daily reality of the ancient physician. Their lives were a world away from the regulated, high-status profession we know today. There were no official medical schools, no standardized licensing exams, and no state oversight. Anyone could call themselves a doctor. Success and reputation depended entirely on one's ability to attract patients and achieve results, often in the face of incurable diseases, and with a very limited understanding of pathology. How, then, did a doctor obtain their knowledge? Most learned through apprenticeship, following an established practitioner, and learning through observation. They studied texts, primarily the growing body of works attributed to Hippocrates, and later the authoritative writings of Galen. This knowledge was a mix of practical advice and complex physiological theory, most famously the doctrine of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, whose balance was believed to determine a person's health. The diseases they faced were formidable. Without an understanding of germ theory, infections were rampant. Treatises and archaeological evidence reveal a constant struggle against tuberculosis, malaria, parasitic infections, and devastating epidemics like the Antonine Plague that ravaged the Roman Empire in the 2nd century CE. Doctors learned to set broken bones with surprising skill, as evidenced by healed fractures in ancient skeletons. Surgery was a risky and brutal affair, performed without anesthesia, but Roman army surgeons in particular developed sophisticated techniques for treating battlefield wounds, extracting weapons, and performing amputations. Pharmacology was a cornerstone of practice, with physicians relying on an extensive knowledge of plants and minerals to create remedies for everything from coughs to digestive ailments. Perhaps most crucial was the doctor's relationship with the community. A physician was a public figure, and their social standing could be precarious. They needed to persuade patients and their families that their methods were superior to those of their rivals. This involved not just medical skill, but a performance of learning and authority, a good bedside manner, a confident prognosis, even when the outcome was uncertain, and a willingness to engage with the patient's family and social circle were essential tools of the trade. They were part of the local fabric, competing and coexisting with other healers who offered different paths to a cure. A modern patient would be shocked if their doctor prescribed a magical amulet alongside an antibiotic. In the ancient world, however, the boundaries between what we would call medicine, magic, and religion were porous, if they existed at all. Healing was a holistic concept, and illness was often seen as having both natural and supernatural causes. A successful healer was one who could address both. Nutton's work intentionally investigates the deep connections between these realms. For much of antiquity, the most popular destinations for the sick were not doctors' clinics, but healing sanctuaries. The most famous of these were dedicated to Asclepius, the Greek god of medicine. Sites like Epidaurus in Greece and Pergamum in Asia Minor were sprawling complexes where the sick would come to perform rituals and sleep in a special dormitory, hoping to receive a cure from the god in their dreams. These incubations were then interpreted by temple priests, who would prescribe treatments that could range from dietary advice and exercise to more mystical instructions. This was not seen as being in opposition to secular medicine. In fact, the great physician Galen began his career as a physician to the gladiators at the Asclepius sanctuary in his home city of Pergamum. Magic was another ubiquitous element of ancient healthcare. Curses were believed to cause illness, and counterspells were needed to cure it. Magical papyri from Roman Egypt are filled with incantations to drive out disease demons. Amulets inscribed with protective symbols or words were worn to ward off sickness. One of the most significant arguments in Nutton's work is the refusal to take Hippocratic medicine as the universal standard. The ancient world was a vast and diverse place, and medical practices varied significantly by region. While the intellectual elite in major centers like Alexandria and Rome debated the finer points of humoral theory, healing practices in the provinces were often a blend of local traditions and imported Greco-Roman ideas. In Egypt, for instance, a medical tradition stretching back millennia continued to thrive under Greek and then Roman rule. Egyptian physicians had their own well-established theories, pharmacological knowledge, and specialized practitioners. While Greek medicine was introduced, it did not simply replace the old ways. Instead, the two systems blended, creating a unique hybrid practice. On the frontiers of the empire, such as in Roman Britain, the situation was different again. Here, the primary agent for the introduction of Roman medical practices was the army. Roman military hospitals, velae judenaria, were sophisticated institutions with dedicated surgical wards, quarantine rooms, and specialized staff. The army surgeons brought with them a level of medical knowledge and a range of surgical instruments previously unknown in the region. Their influence, however, was likely concentrated around military forts and settlements. In the countryside, native Celtic healing traditions, which likely involved a mix of herbalism and druidic ritual, would have continued to be the primary source of healthcare for the local population. This comparative approach reveals that the transplantation of Greek medicine to Rome and its subsequent spread across the empire was not a simple process of replacement. It was a complex negotiation, where dominant medical theories were adapted, blended with, and existed alongside enduring local traditions. There was no single ancient medicine, but rather a multitude of ancient medicines, each shaped by its specific cultural and historical context. By stepping away from the traditional hero-centric narrative, a far richer and more accurate picture of ancient medicine emerges. It was a world defined by its diversity and its pragmatism. It was a marketplace of healing, where the humoral theories of the Hippocratic physician competed with the divine interventions of the temple priest and the protective power of the magician's amulet. It was a world where a doctor's success depended as much on their social skills and understanding of local beliefs as on their medical knowledge. The great figures like Hippocrates and Galen remain undeniably important. They represent a monumental intellectual effort to understand the human body and disease through observation and reason. But as Nutton's work compellingly argues, they must be placed in a new, broader historical context. They were not the only healers, and their rationalist approach was just one of many options available to a person seeking relief from suffering. The true story of ancient medicine is found not just in the texts of these great men, but in the votive offerings left at healing sanctuaries, in the remnants of a Roman army surgeon's toolkit, and in the magical spells whispered over a sickbed. It is the story of a universal and enduring human struggle, the fight against pain and the search for a cure, pursued with all the knowledge, faith, and hope that the ancient world could muster.